Honesty in Alcoholics Anonymous. Honesty. The word honesty comes from the Latin honestus, which means unity, unity with the truth. We are honest with ourselves when our opinions, attitudes, or actions are in accordance with the truth. We are honest with others when our relationships with them, both in word and deed, are in accordance with the truth in our words and actions. Everything else is dishonesty, with all its connotations, double-dealing, excuses, lies, appearances, or whatever else you can think of. As alcoholics, we end up being the most dishonest of all human beings. We end up pathologically dishonest, the most complex liars in the world. This quality is evident in the reactions most of us had when, for the first time, in some way, it was suggested to us that we might be alcoholics, or in the great explosion that followed this unexpected suggestion. Me, an alcoholic, impossible. This basic quality, dishonesty, in a way forces us to take a false position toward others. We don't dare let them know the truth. As a result, there are endless cover-ups, countless excuses. Even in those of us who believed we had a spiritual life, dishonesty saturated everything we did. Our prayers themselves were not only nothing more than words, but a positive lie. Remember, "Oh God, get me out of this drunkenness, and I'll never take another drink." We great liars were not asking for the grace of sobriety. We were asking God to remove the wound, and so when the wound healed, it became the same thing all over again. The end result of all this in the alcoholic was a mess of confusion, mistrust, and all those abnormal circles that haunted him every day in his alcoholic career. So before anything else, honesty is necessary before the alcoholic can simply begin to be sober. Happiness and serenity simply do not exist without honesty. Honesty is like the grease on the axle, the bearing in the wheel, the lathe in the making of the wheel, the axle, and the bearing. It makes us fit into life so that the normal conflicts and frictions that arise from them do not produce heat or destruction or become insurmountable obstacles. History is full of examples of the difference between honesty and dishonesty. In the case of the former, we find many examples of successes that inevitably follow the path of honesty. In the case of the latter, we find many examples of grim failures that simply and inevitably follow the shortcuts of dishonesty. Let us look at some of the men and women whose unprecedented success can be attributed to their honesty. First is St. Paul. His name was Saul. He was not a Roman citizen. He hated Christianity and Christians, but he was honest in his hatred. In the account in Scripture, we find him on the road to Damascus to bring more Christians to torture and death. He hated them. Scripture tells us that he was breathing vengeance, and as he rode in search of human victims, he was not doing it because someone had told him to, or because they could tell him if he didn't, or as a practical player, nor was he doing it as a categorical human gesture. He was breathing vengeance because he hated them, and with his persecution, he was honestly achieving it. He hated them, and to his grace-illuminated mind, he was doing what he thought should be done. Then something happened. There was a brilliant flash of light and a sudden ray of illumination, and Saul was instantly knocked from his horse. Honesty and the grace of God had met head-on. Saul was a proud man. He was stubborn, but he was an honest man. And when the grace of God came face to face with such a person, pride and stubbornness melted completely under the heat of the rays of grace. Grace is able to enter freely into the minds and hearts of such beings because there is no obstacle for it, such as a closed mind, a complicit heart, or ill will. Honesty is good will. And what did Christ say? Peace on earth to men of good will, to honest men. And so when Saul was knocked to the ground and heard a voice saying to him, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? He immediately replied, Who is it that I am persecuting? How different would have been the response of a dishonest person. Hey, persecute. What do you mean persecute? Who is persecuting whom? You must have the wrong person. Points of view, lies, excuses, self-justification, dishonesty. And returning to Saul, we find that because of the grace that entered his heart and will, God led him to become the apostle to the Gentiles, the great Saint Paul, because he was honest. God did not necessarily choose him because he was honest, but having chosen him, the effect of grace was to the point of holiness, because he was very honest. Honesty is not a prerequisite for being chosen by God for special tasks, but once chosen, it is the difference between grace accepted and used, and grace rejected or misused as testimony, an example of Judas. There was also a Mary Magdalene. She was completely lost when her path crossed that of Christ. She was a prostitute. Here, we hasten to explain there are two types of prostitutes. One type is the woman who follows this degrading path for the love of money, selling her body for the money she is paid, for no other reason. She truly abhors those with whom she associates and everything related to it. There is also another type, who are in the minority. They take pleasure in prostitution for the sake of prostitution itself. They associate with men because that is exactly what they want to do. They are not prostitutes because of their family upbringing or their difficulties. They are not indulging in prostitution because someone is forcing them to do so. They do not sell their bodies for the meager pay they receive for it. They are doing what they do simply because they want to do it. They love doing it. Strange, you might say. Yes, but honest. Magdalene was one such woman. Magdalene was a prostitute because she loved doing it, because that was exactly what she wanted to do. And then something happened. Once again, in the realm of grace and honesty, they came face to face. Magdalene and Christ came face to face. She fell at his feet, fully admitting her condition, and shed tears over his feet and anointed them with her hair. Then grace pierced her open heart, that heart so inclined to love lust, and under the warm rays of that grace, that same love took flight on its own and reached the pinnacle of the supernatural and fell in love with Christ. And never again did that supernatural love abandon her. So great, in fact, was Christ's love for her that in return he chose her to appear to her after his resurrection, before Peter and the rest of his apostles. Because he himself revealed to us when he said, because she has loved much, mistakenly, yes, but honestly. Augustine, even in the darkest depths of his sins, showed flashes of his fundamental honesty when he prayed, "O God, give me the grace of purity, but not yet." And so it was that when God's grace and Augustine met on that fortunate evening, Augustine immediately asked, "What do you want me to do?" Without any excuses, without asking why or what for, without self-justification. And Augustine was led to take his place among God's elite as one of the greatest theologians of all time because he was honest. Throughout history, all of God's great ones became great because they were honest. On the other hand, many, many more than we can imagine, although they could have been chosen to occupy places of greatness in God's scheme of things, failed because they were dishonest. Let's look at the AA groups. Who are the ones who are sober and have serenity? Those who are honest. They are not necessarily the ones who know the 12 steps best. They are not necessarily saints. They may still be great sinners, but they are honest. Honesty is the best policy. We now have a good look at all the relapsers. What is wrong? They simply did not want to be honest. Similarly, in the AA Big Book, we read in Chapter 5 that the only ones who have no chance of achieving sobriety are those who are unable to take the program with rigorous honesty. On the other hand, we read in the Big Book of AA, goodwill, honesty, and an open mind are necessary for recovery. They are indispensable. In the early days of AA, there were no 12 steps or big blue book. There were only 3 axioms. First, be honest with yourself. Second, clean up your house. Third, help others. On the other hand, I have never hesitated for fear of valid contradiction to make this statement. If a person is honest and honestly tries, he will remain sober. Let's see how this principle of honesty affects all areas of our daily lives. Let's see how practicing honesty every day not only brings happiness to our lives, but also enables us to adjust safely and successfully throughout our lives. First, honesty in our home life. Honesty will give each family member their own reality and a place where each person can try to think, not about what could have been or what could have gone wrong, but about working together on what can be. Husbands and wives have arguments. That happens. What really caused the problem? When we keep thinking about things or ruminating on them repeatedly, honesty teaches us that we are all human beings and therefore prone to doing petty little things. But the truth is that they are nothing more than an indication of a lack of love. Honesty teaches us to accept all family members as they are, so we don't waste countless hours trying to change others. In the same way, it teaches us to work on ourselves, because the reality in this business of human nature is that, generally speaking, we cannot change others, but we can change ourselves. And it will also be pointed out along these same lines that the more we change ourselves, the more, amazingly, others begin to change with us. Honesty teaches us that love in the home means giving without demanding. Love is sacrifice. It is the common experience of religious ministers, doctors, psychiatrists, judges, and all those who work as counselors that everyone who comes to them with their family problems always comes with the argument, he didn't want to do this, she didn't want to do that. They never hear, I didn't have or do that, or I had or did this. The husband constantly complains about his wife nagging, and she constantly complains about her husband's yelling. An honest assessment of human nature teaches us that it is in the nature of men to yell and in the nature of women to nag, and that there is not much the other party can do about it except accept it. Every honest AA member has come to understand that the vast majority of their problems are due to their own faults, faults that for years they blamed on others. And husband and wife appear in a favorable light under the clear lens of honesty. One of the most common reasons for filing for divorce is usually the result of dishonesty. Let's listen to the lies and deceit of 2 people planning to get married. Because I don't want her to know anything. I'm sure I have faults, lots of them, but I don't want her to find out about them. And I love what he loves. I certainly love books, sports. When in reality, she has never opened a book since she left school and has never played any sport. Or he says, I live for dancing, parties, and people, when in reality he abhors dancing, parties, and people. So these two individuals get married. The emotions gradually fade away, friction develops, and there is incompatibility. If I had known what kind of person you are, I would never have married you. And why didn't they get to know each other? Dishonesty. Then there are the children. One of the biggest reasons children develop wrong attitudes toward life is the inherent dishonesty of their parents. Indulgence, or what Dr. Structure of the University of Pennsylvania called mimetis, is a form of dishonesty. By indulging them, parents try to lead children to expect something from life that life will not give them. They fail to give children an honest approach to life by giving it to them and not teaching them what life will inevitably teach them. The scriptures also teach us, spare the rod and spoil the child. Do you know why? Because life very often uses the rod, whether we like it or not. Honesty will make the child accustomed to what life will give him in the long run. Honesty is the best policy. 2. Honesty in our social life. Honesty in our social life teaches us first and foremost that as members of a society, we have definite obligations to it. Therefore, let us try not to shirk those obligations so often. The interests of the community, the common good, the needs of our neighbor. Honesty also clearly shows us who our neighbor is. It will teach us that all people fit into this category because they are all children of God, just like you and me. Thus, dishonesty prevents us from discriminating against someone because of their nationality, beliefs, color, social status, poverty, or wrongs they may have done to us. Remember, I say to you, love those who hear you, forgive your enemies. And also, this is the greatest of the commandments, that you love one another. Finally, honesty in our social relationships will keep us from becoming social climbers. We should never try to pretend to be something we are not or emphasize it humorously. We should not be the kind of people who use fancy terms or grandiose words when in reality they have no education. 3. Honesty in our business life. It is the honest businessman who ultimately achieves success, and this is true insofar as the businessman is honest with himself. There is no surer path to bankruptcy than the shortcut of self-deception, which is always the sad situation of the businessman who deceived himself about the true condition of his business. Honesty is the best policy. 4. Honesty in our financial affairs. Not all of us are cut out to be business people, but we all have to deal with finances. Those who are dishonest in assessing their own financial situation and their real economic possibilities will get themselves into trouble. This is evidenced by those who always live beyond their means, those who always have more obligations to cover each month than they can meet, who buy things they will never need or never use. We cannot exclude from this category those poor colleagues who are always buying something because it is a bargain. What are they going to do with what they bought? They don't know, but it's a great bargain. 5. Honesty in our emotional life. While trying to get out of one lie, we told another and then another and another. This constant evasion of truth, responsibility, and reality causes nervous tension, emotional fears, and mental acceleration that seeks to cover up yesterday's dishonesty. The human being who has nothing to hide from God or man is the one who lives free from tension, emotional crises, and nervous breakdowns. Fear is what breeds most emotional problems, but those who are honest have nothing to fear. Even those who desperately and at all costs try to please everyone are dishonest. Wisdom teaches it, and human experience proves it. No one can please everyone. Honesty teaches us not to try. It suggests that we always do the best we can with what we have. And if our actions displease or even hurt someone, this is something we should not worry about. It is amazing to see how many human beings live in constant emotional turmoil trying to please everyone. They usually end up displeasing more people than they would have if they had not tried so desperately to do so. Honesty is the best policy. 6. Honesty in our mental life. We use the expression mental acceleration to define a phenomenon that is quite common in the vast majority of alcoholics and neurotics. Unrepentant liars are fully aware of this process. They know how it begins. It usually starts with pretense and lying, in a frantic effort to escape reality, in a mad attempt to surpass reality, in a constant effort to forget our fellow man. This is part of the criminal mind and is often responsible for their descent into drug addiction. In reality, it is simply a dishonest attempt to cunningly defeat the truth. None of this is found in the plans of sane people because they seek the truth and try to adjust their lives to this learned truth. On the contrary, liars, pretenders, and dishonest people, by tearing the truth away from them, are constantly engaged in evading reality and responsibility. The honest person rests in meditation and peace of mind. The dishonest person writhes in mental conflicts, fears, and mental acceleration. Honesty is the best policy. 7. Honesty in our physical life. Many sudden illnesses arise from dishonesty, from refusing to recognize or accept symptoms, heart failure, sudden loss of health, and premature aging. In many people could have been avoided if they had been honest with their doctors and themselves and had done something about the symptoms they at least suspected. There are generally 3 basic attitudes among people who consult a doctor. 2 are dishonest and 1 is honest. First, there are those who go with the determination to convince the doctor that they are completely fine. In their attempt, they will use all kinds of evasive false answers to get the doctor to declare them 100% healthy. In many cases, they succeed in deceiving the doctor and themselves, but they cannot deceive their bodies. Sooner or later, their health declines. They have a heart attack, or they are suddenly struck by premature old age. There are those comrades who, in their self-pity and hypochondria, go to the doctor determined to convince him that they are in poor health. At least unconsciously, they are trying to obtain a doctor's note as an excuse to avoid many of life's responsibilities. If they fail to convince the doctor, they try to get other people to recognize that they are sick. If they fail at this, at least they will succeed in convincing themselves. They are dishonest, they are unhappy, they are really sick, but not with the disease they can complain about. And then there is the honest person who goes to the doctor for a checkup, who is searching, who wants to know the truth because, knowing it, they can adjust to it and their lifestyle. Such a person may find themselves with a sick body, but despite their illness, they can be relaxed, at peace, and happy, because they know the facts and live according to them. They are honest. Aging gracefully is another way of saying aging honestly. Honesty is the best policy. 8. Honesty in our spiritual life. There is no major area of life in which dishonesty wreaks such havoc, and where honesty is such a necessary factor for success as in the spiritual life. In fact, one of the primary reasons for failure in the spiritual life and spiritual growth is a dishonest assessment of oneself. Most people consider themselves worse or better than they really are. This is dishonesty and is an obstacle to God's grace. Let us analyze this more thoroughly. There is the companion who, in his or her deceptive self-pity, always has more faults than he or she really has. He or she does not find that he or she still has faults when he or she thinks in self-pity that he or she should be free of them after having worked so hard for so long. This leads nowhere because they forget or do not want to accept the fact that in the spiritual life, the work of eliminating defects, as far as we are concerned, lies in doing the groundwork, that is, detecting those defects. Success in eliminating them is in God's hands when He decides. And this usually happens, my friend, on the day you become humble, which means being honest, because humility is truth, and in truth, honesty and humility have nothing to do with self-pity or self-contempt. Anyone who deprives themselves or denies certain qualities that God has endowed them with to compete with their peers is dishonest. He accepts that we are endowed with qualities. It is not prideful to recognize this. It is honorable to give credit for our talents to the one who gave them to us. Everyone, absolutely everyone, has qualities. Many of them are gifts that have been given to us not for our honor and glory, but for the benefit of those who live with us. To deny having these qualities is dishonesty. To deny that they are gifts from God is dishonesty. But to recognize them, accept them, use them, and thank God for them is honesty. Refusing to use our gifts on the pretext that it would make us proud is an excuse to remain sinners. We are as we are, full of flaws and freely endowed with certain gifts. This is honesty. It is humility that frees us from our flaws. Goodwill plus grace enables us to use our gifts successfully. And in our spiritual life, where will we learn to be honest? Where will we find goodwill? Where will we obtain grace? In honest prayer and meditation. Let's take a quick look at the second part of Step 11, asking Him only to let us know His will for us and give us the strength to accept it. Honesty is the best policy. 9. In our AA life, sobriety is the result of